So guys, here I am in the morning of my cruise. I arose early that morning and started to get dressed and prepare for my cruise. I like to get up early because one, I had some additional things that I needed to do that day, like finish packing. And I like to just make sure the house is tidy before I leave because I don't want to come back home to a dirty house. So I finish up my packing, putting in my last few things after I got ready, my makeup, and gathering my bag that I'm going to take on the cruise, and to finish packing up the rest of my items. And so for this trip, I'm just taking my large suitcase. I did not take my small carry-on. The reason being, I needed a larger suitcase to make sure I could take lots of alternative pieces for the trip because I just couldn't judge the weather for the trip. And that would just be my recommendation for you when you're planning your Alaskan cruise as well. And so I finish up in the kitchen. I go to the kitchen because I want to just do my last bit of tidying up. I'm taking my Keurig water dispenser and I want to pour out all of the water that's in there because I'm going to be gone on my cruise for a week and I do not want that water just sitting in the Keurig while I'm gone on my trip. And that's just what I'd like to do because when I go on my trip, I do not want to come back home to an untidy place and I have all of my luggage. So I do just one last pass of the house just to check everything to make sure everything is great. And then I'm off to the cruise. And the next thing you know, I'm on the ship. I will say for this trip, my embarkation was really quick, smooth, and easy. My arrival time was scheduled for around between 11 and 12. I arrived about 10:40 and they allowed me to go on even though they said they would not allow you to come on, but it was not crowded. It was a seamless registration and check-in and I arrived on the ship. Now, I am on the Royal Caribbean Quantum class of ship. This particular ship is the Ovations of the Seas. It's part of the Quantum class. I have sailed at this point on 4 of the Royal Caribbean Quantum class of ships. It is my favorite class of ships. I've taken the Quantum class, the actual Quantum ship, to Alaska. I've done the Odyssey of the Seas twice. Both of those were in Europe for my Holy Land cruise as well as my most recent trip to Greece this year. And then I've also taken the Anthem on a 14-day Mediterranean cruise. So I'm very familiar with this ship and there's just some favorite things that I love about the ship that I am going to share with you. But my first day arriving on the ship, I am typically just walking around, getting my bearings. At this point, just know your room will not be ready for you to go in. They're still cleaning up from the previous cruise where all the passengers just disembarked. So they're making your rooms ready. They tend not to be ready till about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They'll lock the doors and then let you in once that time is set. And I was on my way to the Diamond Lounge, but I was not able to enter at this time because I did not have my C-Pass card, which would be placed at my room. So I wasn't able to do that. I just walked around the ship. And of course, I was going to visit some of my favorite spots on the ship in lieu of just waiting in the Diamond Lounge. But again, the Quantum class of ships, if you consider Royal Caribbean, for me, my favorite class that they have is the Quantum class. If you know anything about Royal Caribbean, they have their ships and they're all in a class. My favorite is the Quantum class because of the amenities that it offers. And so whenever I'm on the ship, one such place that I love to go to, as you see, I'm up on the pool deck. This is one of the places that I like to hang out and sit. Not the favorite, not the most favorite, but it is one of the places that I hang out. And one of the first places I like to visit once I arrive on the ship is at the ice cream machine. I love this Royal Caribbean ice cream. I don't know what it is. I'll have to go and get an ice cream cone. And this particular young man, you don't always get a good person, but this particular young man knew how to make the ice cream cone. So I visited him several times throughout the cruise. Another favorite thing I enjoy and appreciate about the Quantum class of ships is that they have bumper cars. So if you remember from one of my Grecian cruise, I had a video, and I'll post links to these videos, but I love the Quantum class of ships because they have the bumper cars. That's one of the recreational activities that you're able to do on the Quantum class, and it runs quite a bit. Now, I don't particularly like all the bumping. I know it's bumper cars. I like to just ride around in circles. And so one of the other wonderful activities that they have on the Quantum class of ships is this 360 North Star. And this particular activity, you get into this glass ball that you see, and it's on this arm that raises up 300 feet above the ship. And on sea days, if you ride this, if you're brave enough, it will swing out on either side of the ship when you're just hanging over the water. But the views from the top of this are just amazing. This particular day, we were in port, so anyone who rode that day got a good view of the scenery around the port. But this is just another one of those activities that I love about the Quantum class of ships. Another of my favorite things about the Quantum class of ships is the 270 venue, aptly named for the 270-degree scenic view that you are afforded due to the floor to ceiling glass windows. This is my favorite place to hang out. There's lots of little nooks in here that allow you privacy, where you can just sit in these high back chairs, comfortable high back chairs with views of the water. I was able to read a book and a half during this cruise as I came to this venue. There's also a 270 cafe where I will often come in here and get either a continental breakfast or just a quick salad. There's sandwiches such as paninis and grilled cheese, and they have hot sandwiches and cold sandwiches. And there's a coffee station in there as well. I don't eat in there a lot, but it will have an opportunity to provide you with snacks. This particular morning, I had gone up to the buffet in the Windjammer and brought my food down because I tend to just eat maybe like some boiled eggs, a couple of slices of bacon, and some pineapple for breakfast when I'm on the cruise. And so I'm just enjoying that in the 270 cafe, which also in the 270 venue are the entertainment. They use electronic technology that you can watch a lot of the entertainment. Another one of my favorite things is the Chops Grill. This is one of the specialty restaurants and something that you have to consider when you plan your cruise. You have an option to do specialty restaurants in a meal package, and you have to determine whether or not that's going to be a great value for you. For my cruise, I bought the ultimate dinner package, which allowed me to eat at any of the specialty restaurants for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. I'm not sure that it was a great value for 7 days, definitely on one of the longer cruises, because what you have to keep in mind is that on port days, the venues, these specialty restaurants are not open for lunch. So you have to weigh, is there a value for getting the ultimate dinner package, which gives you all access, versus say buying like a 3-night dinner package where you can go to the free meal venues, as well as have an opportunity to enjoy the specialty dining restaurants. But Chops Grill, I have to say, this steakhouse is my favorite. It is on every Royal Caribbean ship, but I found that this tended to be my favorite. I did also participate or enjoy Jamie's, which is another one of the specialty restaurants on board this particular ship. But there are a ton of dining venues on a Royal Caribbean ship, so you don't have to worry about whether or not you have to pay for specialty restaurants, because there are lots of free restaurants that come with your cruise itinerary, that just come with your purchase. So you don't have to buy a specialty restaurant. I just like to. In this particular sailing, a consideration, I was glad that I did, because this sailing was booked and I did not have to worry about the fight or the hustle and hassle with everyone purchasing or going to the main dining hall or to the main buffet location. I was able to go right in every night and get my seat, and I had wonderful meals each night and for lunch. Another thing that I enjoy about my cruising is the wonderful people that I get to meet. This gentleman and his wife, this couple, the world is so small. This couple happened to live in the town where I used to live, in the same neighborhood. We live in such a small world. And so just know that when you plan your cruise, your stateroom will not be ready when you arrive on. It'll be a couple of hours after you arrive on that your stateroom will be ready. So you may have to carry around your different luggage. It's important for you to know that when you arrive. Also important to think about is what type of room you're going to book. I typically book an outside balcony. However, on this cruise, I did not. You want to think about an Alaskan cruise. A outside balcony is what you want. So in my room, I did have what they call a virtual balcony, as you just saw. So there's a camera outside and it broadcasts on the screen that's in my room. So I did have a virtual balcony, but I much rather have an actual outside balcony. That's a consideration when you're booking your room. The other thing is to pay attention on the ship's design to know exactly where your room is situated. My room is an inside cabin, but it's also attached to a suite. So to enter into my room, there's a main door to enter in, and inside that door is my room as well as the access room to the suite. This was probably set up more for if there was going to be a family or a large group traveling together. And the only thing about it was that this family they had children, and so when they would go in and out of the door was slamming. I would have much preferred, if I was going to have an inside cabin, that it was actually a separate solo cabin. I won't have to worry about that in the future, because I don't plan on doing an inside cabin again. I love the water, and that's why I love to cruise. I love to be able to see the water. But the room, everything about the room was ample for me as a solo traveler. I had plenty of closet space, plenty of space in the room. This room did not have the two twin beds that you put together. It was actually just a queen size bed that was in this room. So it was ultimately a smaller room. The bathroom, however, was the same size as what tends to be in a single inside cabin room, or even in a balcony room for that matter. But it was enough. It was enough for me. So you have to think about, you're traveling, if you're a solo traveler or if you are traveling with a group, the room size. Just make sure you double check the room, where the room is, and how many people this room will hold. My room was specifically for 1 to 2 people. And so another thing that I will just recommend you consider when you book your cruise, when you're planning to travel, is to think about your wardrobe. Think about where you're going, especially to Alaska. Now, at this time of year, I went to Alaska at the end of August and then through the very first of September. And the weather was supposed to be rainy and much colder. But fortunately I had people who had just gone and they gave me a tip that it was actually hot and sunny when they went. So then I was not able to just pack according to what is typically the weather in Alaska. I had to consider whether it was going to be hot or cold. So I packed different pieces that allowed me to switch up according to what the weather was going to be. So I brought shorts, I brought long slacks, of course I brought dresses for the evening. And I do not tend to do the formal nights. You can do that. Just know on a 7-day cruise, you're going to have one formal night. And then there will be other nights that they want you to dress to impress, but typically one formal night. Now, for me, I'm all about comfort. I don't tend to dress up in the formal nights. So just know that when you're going, you need to dress considering that, but also dress for the weather, and make sure you bring things that you can either layer and take off, and give yourself some options in what you're going to wear. For example, here I'm wearing my denim jacket with my fatigue sort of warm-up pants, just kind of layer. And then I'm also taking my rain jacket because this particular day it was a little misty and I just wanted to make sure of that I was going to be okay for the weather. When you go, it's important to think about the itinerary where you want to go. My cruise went to Sitka, Skagway, Juneau, Victoria, British Columbia, Endicott Arms, and Dawes Glaciers. So it's important to think about the itinerary. Longer itineraries, such as those that go to Seward, Alaska, or Anchorage, they tend to be 11 days or more. So if you want a shorter cruise, just know that it's going to be a similar itinerary to the one that I took. And also, the longer cruises tend to be what we call open cruises, which means that it may start in one city and port, but it will end in another city or port. It will not return to the port where you embarked on the cruise. My particular cruise, shorter cruise, and it was what we call a closed cruise. So it started in Seattle and it ended in Seattle. One thing I also recommend is that when you book an Alaskan cruise, make sure you book an additional days either before the cruise or after the cruise so that you can sightsee in Seattle. There is so much for you to do and see in Seattle. Just go ahead and extend that vacation either before the cruise or after the cruise. This particular day, we arrived in Sitka, Alaska. And what I will tell you about Sitka is, among the stops in our itinerary, Sitka is the smallest of the towns that we visited. So along with that, you know there are going to be less excursions for you to do, less shops to visit. When you're planning your cruise, it's also important for you to know the towns that you visit, what is the unique thing about that city or about Alaska that you can plan to purchase as a souvenir or a keepsake. And so the things that Alaska is known for, the goods and the merchandise that Alaska's known for is, of course, seafood, the salmon that you can purchase and have shipped back to your home. It's known for the furs, so the furriers. It's also known for the animal pelts. And then it's also known for jewelry and wood carving, decor items or memorabilia items that you can purchase as keepsakes. So those are a few of the things that are known in Alaska, the goods and the merchandise. So think about that when you're visiting. What is it that you might want to purchase and bring back? I have to tell you that when you visit Alaska, you must make sure that you bring a camera so that you can take all the wonderful pictures and videos, if you have one, of this picturesque place. It is one of the most beautiful places that you want to visit. When we visited Sitka, we were able to disembark on a port. We did not have to take one of the lifeboats onto a dock. We were able to dock to port right at a dock and disembark from the cruise. And in Sitka, the cruise line provided free round trip shuttles in town and back to the ship. And so this particular day, I did not have an excursion plan. Also, know that you do not have to plan an excursion for every stop on your itinerary. If you do your research, if you listen to cruise blogs, you'll know what other people are saying about that town, whether or not an excursion is best or whether or not you can just explore the town on your own. And I say that Sitka is one of those places that you can explore the town on your own. Now, they do have excursions for you to participate in, such as going with the Alaskan Huskies. They have the game fishing where you catch and release. They also have canoeing and kayaking available on most of the places in the itinerary for Alaska. As we go to the next stops, there will be more places and more opportunities as the cities get larger. And so here I am just taking a stroll and shopping, and I happen to go into this furrier shop, and you can see the animal pelts that they have. This happened to be deer pelts. You can, if that's a keepsake item, I thought about that for my office, purchasing one of those to throw on the floor in my office, but I happen to have a beautiful rug already on my floor that I want to keep, and that would not look great sitting on top of my rug. So I decided against that. But there are beautiful furs and cashmere jackets in this place. Now for me, I'll say that I'm not really a fur person, especially if it's up around my skin. But if it's something that you love, just know Alaska is the place that you want to go and purchase a beautiful fur. This particular shop had the most beautiful furs that I've seen and different colors. So you weren't stuck with like a black or just your typical traditional colors. They had all different types of furs and colors, minks and chinchillas and just anything you can think of, fox, just a range, just beautiful items. So just know that when you're planning your cruise, think about the places that you're going and have in your mind what that memorabilia item, that keepsake item that you want to take home. Years ago, I figured in my travels that I would tend to take those little knick-knack souvenirs home and they would just collect dust or sit in a bag somewhere. And I've decided I'm not going to do that anymore. When I go on my trips, I'm going to take something of value, something that I'm going to use that's not going to be sitting just collecting dust, something that I would use. I also take the opportunity to take great photos because that's another opportunity for me to come home and make a memory book, which I have done several times. I'd love to just take my photos and take them off my camera when I get home and create a memory book, a photo book. And I love to include just little comments about the trip to help me remember. And so the next day we arrived in Skagway. Now Skagway is in the middle size-wise of Sitka and Juneau. But if I tell you, Skagway was the most beautiful, picturesque place I have seen thus far on this cruise. Skagway is so beautiful. And I would recommend that whatever itinerary you take, you must include Skagway. In addition to that, you will find more shops in Skagway, and there are many more opportunities for excursions in Skagway than, let's say, were available in Sitka. But there are plenty of merchants, and again, you'll have the same opportunities for furriers to purchase fur if that's what you're looking for. Now, I did purchase some gloves in Sitka. They're leather gloves, and they're wrapped around the wrist with mink. Now, I purchased those because I did need a pair of gloves. So, like I said, I tend to buy those things that I need or that I definitely know that I'm going to use or wear. It's important to know that wherever you're going, what goods and products and merchandise is that place known for. For example, in my trips to Europe, I know that when I went to Turkey, that Turkey was known for coffee, it was known for rugs as well as leather. And I bought beautiful rugs and had them shipped to me, and I also bought beautiful leather jackets from Turkey. You know, when you go to Rome, you're going to be buying leather bags or leather jackets or anywhere in Italy. So just know where you're going, what it's good for, and keep in mind the merchandise that you want to take. And so in Skagway, I did plan an excursion. And what I'll tell you is it's important to know that whatever port you stop in on Alaska, make sure you know whether or not your passport is required. Because on my particular cruise, for this excursion that I was doing this day, my passport was required. And I actually had to go back to my stateroom and get my passport because I didn't know that before I left the ship. On this particular excursion, we do take a scenic drive up to the summit, but it's the summit is actually in Canada, and Canada is very strict with Americans. And so Skagway was a beautiful place to visit. I do recommend that if you plan a cruise, an Alaskan cruise, doesn't have to be on Royal Caribbean. There are plenty of cruise ships that go. Royal Caribbean is just my cruise ship of choice. And again, I'm on the Quantum class of ships, which is my favorite class of ships. Since I live in Seattle, I definitely want to take advantage of, taking an Alaskan cruise on a port that's right out of my own city and I'm not having to fly anywhere. But if you go on an Alaskan cruise, make sure that you do include Skagway on the itinerary. You will enjoy it. I enjoyed going into this picturesque town with all of these historic buildings, and it just took me back to the gold rush, the Alaskan gold rush, as I looked at all of these classic historic buildings. Makes you think you're walking through a Western town. And so we made it to the top of the summit and we just passed the Canadian border and we were back in Alaska. And I was able to take some beautiful photos on top of the summit. Again, I'll tell you, if you visit Alaska, you have to include Skagway on your stop. It was just so beautiful. So beautiful. Once our excursion and our tour was complete, they did drop us back off in town, and I was able to just take a couple of photos and just walk through the town. I enjoyed that, taking a scenic stroll along the streets where I could get a close and up close and personal look at these historic buildings and all of the shops. Now, one thing I will say about Skagway is that it was lined with a plethora of jewelry stores. So there were jewelry stores all lined down the streets of this town on both sides of the street. So if you're looking for jewelry, you have to find it in Skagway. And there's more in Juneau as well, but compared to Sitka, there is just a plethora of jewelry stores. And so there are also the souvenir shops, and this little shop I happened to stop in. I purchased some fresh popcorn. They have the bag popcorn in the different flavors, but I just happened to wanted the fresh popcorn, so I purchased that. But it's the typical souvenir shop where you're going to be able to find your mugs and your spoon holders for the oven, as well as your kitchen towels and t-shirts. So you'll be able to find any of those types of souvenirs that you want to purchase for yourself or for family members as souvenirs that you want to bring back. I just enjoyed walking down the streets of this old town and stopping in and just looking at all the shops. Now, just like any Royal Caribbean stop along, you're going to find the shops where they have the bamboo textiles, the sheets and the pillow covers. And of course, there's the Del Sol, which is the Ad Sun for the color changing t-shirts and color changing nail polishes. So those are just typical to Royal Caribbean. Any stop that Royal Caribbean has, you'll find those typical shops, and it's no different if you visit Alaska. You'll find those Royal Caribbean shops. And at the end of my tour in Skagway, I just wanted to take a picture of that historic picture of the gold miners, and then I just started my walk back to the pier where I will then take the shuttle back to the ship. And again, I will say that if you plan your Alaskan cruise, just a reminder, you just want to make sure that you wear and pack the appropriate clothing items. Just plan your excursions and know that you don't always have to go out and pay for an excursion. There's plenty of things for you to do just on your own. And so the next day we arrived in Juneau. Now, Juneau, Alaska is the largest of the three locations that we visited on this cruise itinerary. Juneau is the largest of the locations, and there was a plethora of shops. I would say double the shops that we saw in Skagway and Sitka. This town is more populous. There are a lot more shops for you to do, lots of additional excursions for you to participate in. You know, some typical and similar to the other towns, such as the dog sledding, the kayaking, the canoeing, the whale watching. But additional excursions here included like taking helicopters, over to the glaciers. But each cruise, you plan your itinerary for each location. There will be itineraries for you to do. You can do 4-wheel drives, scenic drives around the town, just a ton of things for you to be able to do. In Juneau, Alaska, I will say, since I was just walking in the local town, I did not plan an excursion. I just wanted to get off the ship. I was still looking for that memorabilia piece that I wanted to take back. So that's what I did, is got off the ship. I did not need my passport in Juneau, as I was not going to be taking an excursion that was going to take me into Canada. This particular day also, unlike the other days, it was a little misty this day, definitely overcast, but a little misty. Not so hot. It was supposed to be, not so cold. It was supposed to be cold and rainy, but the temperature just really wasn't that cold. I wore my hat out this day and I had to take it off because it just wasn't that cold. That's something to consider when you're planning your trip. Typically in May, it's going to be cold in May, especially when you get near the glaciers in May and June, because the cruise runs start either the end of April or May. The cruise run to Alaska will start, and it will be colder then, and then it's supposed to be colder once August hits, colder and rainy. That just wasn't the case this trip. It wasn't the typical weather. I mean, who has typical weather these days? But all of this, the merchants in Juneau, again, it's lined with jewelry stores. Here's another of my favorites, which is the Effie jewelry store. I have several Effie pieces, but the street is lined with jewelry stores. I particularly wanted to purchase from a local maker, handmade local maker. That's what I was looking for when I went to Alaska this trip. And here are some of the handmade items you see. But there are plenty of merchants who are waiting, for you to purchase. They wait on the cruise ships to come in to be patronized by the cruise by the cruisers. Another thing that I will say to be aware of when you plan your trip or you're going to Alaska, as with any cruise that you're going on when you're purchasing your items, because although I purchased items before, when I was in the towns and I priced some of the items, let's say from Effie, I actually got a better deal on the cruise ship than what was being offered in the store in the town. So that's just something to be aware of when you're looking for jewelry, let's say. And just know that just like with all of the other towns we visited on this itinerary, the goods and merchandise that Alaska's known for, of course, another one of those is the fur and the furriers that they have. So in Juneau as well, there were locations for you to be able to buy the furs and the pelts. I will say that I noticed that the prices were the same. Now, whether or not they would give you a better deal once you start talking with them, it was interesting that I noticed the prices of the furs were the same. For example, the deer pelts, that each city in the fur stores and each city, they had deer pelts for sale, and they were the same price. I think they were like $2.99, and they were fairly nice sizes. So on my trip in Skagway and Juneau, and I'm sorry, in Sitka and in Juneau, I did touring on my own. I just walked the town. Again, I say you do not have to purchase an additional excursion for every place you want to. If you do anything, if you're not the kind of water person where you do kayaking and canoeing all the time, if that's not your thing, they do have zip lining. You can take scenic drives. There's excursions for scenic drives. And if you're slower paced and maybe not as mobile, you can do just the walk, just the walk around town. And once I'd finished my walking tour of the town, it was time for me to return to the ship. And so I simply just walked back to the ship, and the first thing I'm going to do is head back to the ice cream cone machine. One thing I will recommend, I will definitely say to you, you must take an Alaskan cruise. This is the most beautiful part of the country you will ever see. It is so beautiful. The breathtaking views, the mountains, being surrounded by the mountains, and the opportunity to see glaciers and icebergs as we're sailing, and as we pull into like Dawes, Endicott glaciers or Dawes glaciers, just to see the icebergs. It is so beautiful, not to mention just the breathtaking views of the mountains and the water. Again, my favorite way to vacation is by a cruise, because I get to be on the water, but being in Alaska, just picturesque. I'm saying I have to include this as part of an annual vacation. I did go to Alaska last year, and I went on a 5-day. This year I did a 7-day. I will say when you take the Alaskan cruise, try your best to get an outside balcony so that you can enjoy the water and just enjoy those views. Just breathtaking views as we're pulling through Endicott Arms. Just beautiful. So you have to take an Alaskan cruise. That's my recommendation for you. I enjoyed this cruise and I hope that you enjoyed my cruise.